July 11th, 2026, and the ballistic missiles are already in the air. Not metaphorically, not as a threat issued through a state media press release, not as a warning delivered through diplomatic backchannels in the middle of the night. Actual Iranian ballistic missiles rising from launch sites inside northwestern Iran, their exhaust trails cutting visible arcs through the sky on footage that is already circulating and being verified, fired toward targets in Jordan, toward U.S. positions in Iraq, toward the Kurdish regional capital of Erbil, toward American military infrastructure that spans the entire arc of the Middle East from the Persian Gulf to the Iraqi interior. Iran has launched, massively, and the target list is longer and more geographically distributed than anything the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has attempted in recent memory. This is the counterattack. This is what the IRGC promised when it used the word first stage, when it publicly declared through official institutional channels that the American strikes degrading its military infrastructure were not going unanswered. And now, on July 11th, 2026, the answer is in the air. Multiple ballistic missiles from the Markazi province of northwestern Iran. At least 5 confirmed launches from Urmia in the western Azerbaijan province, directed toward targets in Jordan, specifically toward a base jointly operated by the U.S. and Royal Jordanian Air Forces. Air defense systems racing skyward over Jordan in footage that shows interceptors climbing hard through the atmosphere, smoke plumes visible against the horizon as the engagement unfolds in real time above a country that most Western audiences had not placed inside this conflict's blast radius even 48 hours ago. Jordan is now inside this war's geography. That is not a minor development, but let's back all the way up. Because to understand the full weight of what is happening right now, you need to understand what triggered this counterattack, what it is designed to accomplish strategically, and why the details buried inside the operational picture. The rail bridge, the nuclear power plant, the Chinese supply line that has just been severed, change the entire meaning of this exchange in ways that the headline summaries are systematically failing to convey. The United States military, in the days immediately preceding this Iranian counterattack, conducted what has been confirmed as the largest and most expansive strike campaign against Iran since the current phase of hostilities began. Approximately 90 targets struck across multiple Iranian provinces in a single operational cycle. Air defense systems destroyed, coastal surveillance assets blinded, missile and drone storage facilities eliminated, naval capabilities suppressed, IRGC barracks and operational facilities across Bushehr province flattened, an IRGC airport in southeastern Iran taken out, maritime infrastructure at the port of Chabahar systematically dismantled, the control tower, the pier facilities, the naval base installations, all hit in coordinated sequence. Railway bridges in Golestan province destroyed, power plants in the southern provinces targeted, with confirmed outages spreading through the regions bordering Pakistan. The Bushehr nuclear city, with all the geopolitical sensitivity that name carries, surrounded by strikes that the IRGC's own institutional statements acknowledged as a direct challenge to the Islamic Republic's territorial integrity and military survivability. That was the American campaign that preceded what is happening right now. And now Iran has answered it, not with a symbolic salvo designed to satisfy domestic audiences while minimizing the risk of further escalation. With a massive, multi-vector, geographically distributed ballistic missile campaign that is simultaneously targeting U.S. military positions in at least 3 separate countries: Jordan, Iraq, and the Gulf Theater, while Iranian state media is reporting U.S. cruise missile impacts on the Bushehr nuclear power plant itself, and while Tomahawk cruise missiles are confirmed still flying over Iranian skies in the ongoing American offensive that has not paused, has not stood down, and by all available indicators has no intention of doing either. Both sides are striking simultaneously, right now, at this moment. That is the operational reality of July 11th, 2026. And it is a reality that the word war does not fully capture anymore, because what is happening across the Middle East tonight has the geographic footprint, the weapons density, and the multi-country involvement of something larger and more structurally dangerous than a bilateral U.S.-Iran military exchange. Let's go through the Iranian counterattack in specific detail, because every element of its targeting selection is a deliberate message, and each message needs to be decoded separately. The ballistic missiles fired from the Markazi province of northwestern Iran toward Jordan represent the most significant geographic expansion of this conflict since it began. Markazi, meaning central in Persian, sits in the interior of Iran, away from the coastal launch sites that the U.S. military has been systematically targeting. The choice to launch from an interior province rather than the coastal military infrastructure that has been the focus of American degradation efforts tells you something critical. The IRGC has dispersed its launch capacity deliberately. It is not relying solely on the coastal missile architecture that American planners have been targeting. It has distributed launch capability across the country's interior in a way designed to survive the coastal targeting campaign and maintain retaliatory punch even as the perimeter is being dismantled. That is not the behavior of a military force in disarray. That is the behavior of a military force that planned for exactly this scenario and pre-positioned accordingly. The target in Jordan, the airbase jointly operated by U.S. and Royal Jordanian Air Forces, is a specific and deliberate selection. Jordan has been drawn into this conflict's geography not by its own choice, but by the arc of Iranian missile trajectories that have increasingly threaded through Jordanian airspace, triggering air raid sirens on Jordanian territory and forcing the Jordanian government to activate national air defense protocols that it had not previously needed to engage in this conflict. By now targeting a base on Jordanian soil that hosts American forces, the IRGC is making a direct statement. Proximity to American military infrastructure makes you a target regardless of which flag flies over your government building. It is a message aimed not just at Jordan, but at every U.S. partner nation in the region whose territory hosts American forces, and who might be calculating their own exposure to this conflict. And the Jordanian air defense response was immediate and visible. Footage from the engagement shows interceptors rising from Jordanian territory to meet the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles, smoke plumes tracing interception attempts across the sky, the sirens of air raid warnings audible on the ground, the full architecture of a country's air defense system being pushed to active engagement against an incoming ballistic missile threat in real time. But Jordan is not the only front the IRGC opened tonight. Warning sirens fired at Camp Victory near the Baghdad Airport, a U.S. military position inside the Iraqi capital. Iran is targeting American forces in Iraq simultaneously with the Jordanian strikes, compressing the geographic scope of the defensive challenge facing American commanders who must now manage incoming threats on multiple vectors from multiple directions at the same moment. Explosions confirmed in Erbil, the capital of the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq, where U.S. consular and military advisory presence makes it a meaningful target from the IRGC's perspective. 8 missile launchers identified and confirmed as activated for firing in an additional sequence, suggesting the launch cycles are not complete but ongoing. And then the IRGC released footage of its own missile launches, an institutional decision to make the counterattack visually documented and publicly verified, not just claimed. The footage shows multiple missiles ascending in sequence, another launch following the first, a third and fourth rising in the same operational window. The IRGC is not just conducting these strikes, it is broadcasting them, ensuring that audiences across the region and the world understand that the Islamic Republic has responded and continues to respond with ballistic weaponry capable of reaching targets across a geographic arc stretching from northwestern Iran to Jordan. Now, here's the detail that most of the coverage is not connecting with the strategic weight it deserves. The rail bridge hit is not just a piece of infrastructure. It is a supply line to China and Russia, and it has just been severed. Iran confirmed it. Iranian state media acknowledged that a U.S. strike hit a rail bridge used for trade routes, a bridge that forms part of the rail line connecting Iran with Russia and China for the supply of goods, equipment, and critically military hardware. This is not a railway bridge in a provincial Iranian backwater with no significance beyond local transportation. This is a node in the transit corridor that allows China and Russia to move supplies into Iran, including, according to analysts tracking this conflict, new defensive systems, replacement missile components, and the kind of equipment that allows a military under sustained degradation campaign to replenish what it is losing. The route runs through Turkmenistan. It connects the Iranian rail network to Chinese supply chains through Central Asia. It branches to connect with Russian supply infrastructure as well. And it has now been cut. The bridge is gone. The tracks on either side lead to nothing. The corridor that allowed ground-based resupply from China to Iran without crossing hostile airspace or contested maritime routes has been physically severed by an American strike. Think about what that means operationally. The Chinese are not going to fly military supply aircraft into Iran while American bombs are falling across its territory on a nightly basis. The calculation does not require deep analytical sophistication. It requires only a basic understanding of Chinese risk tolerance when it comes to direct military involvement in a conflict with the United States. Beijing's support for Tehran has been economic, diplomatic, and covert. It has not involved Chinese military aircraft flying into active American strike zones. With the rail corridor now destroyed, the remaining viable resupply routes for Iran are dramatically narrowed. Russia can still move material through the Caspian Sea, but the Chinese pipeline into Iran, the supply chain that has been the subject of considerable analytical attention as a potential lifeline for the Islamic Republic's military sustainability, has effectively been closed by that single bridge strike. That is a strategic blow of a different order from destroying a missile launcher or eliminating a coastal radar array. Destroying a weapon reduces Iran's current inventory. Destroying the supply corridor reduces Iran's ability to replenish that inventory indefinitely. The targeting of that rail bridge was not incidental. It was a deliberate choice to attack the logistical architecture of Iran's military sustainability rather than just its current operational capacity. Now let's address the Bushehr nuclear power plant directly. because this is where the situation becomes most geopolitically complex and most analytically significant. Iranian state media reported that U.S. cruise missiles have struck the Bushehr nuclear power plant in southern Iran. Footage circulating shows a massive smoke plume rising from the Bushehr region following what is described as a direct missile or bomb impact. And Tomahawk cruise missiles, the United States Navy's long-range precision strike weapon, are confirmed flying over the skies of Bushehr province as the targeting of the nuclear facility continues to be prioritized in the American campaign. The Bushehr nuclear power plant is not just a military target. It is a facility with Russian technical involvement, where Russian engineers have been based, where the Kremlin has drawn its own red lines about international attacks, and where the geopolitical consequences of a strike extend well beyond the bilateral U.S.-Iran military equation into the broader framework of U.S.-Russia strategic relations. A cruise missile impact on the Bushehr nuclear facility is not something that Beijing and Moscow can process quietly as background noise. It is a direct challenge to Russian technical presence in Iran and to Chinese strategic investment in the Iranian energy sector that forces both powers to calculate their own response posture in ways that ripple far beyond the immediate military exchange. The smoke plume over Bushehr is visible. The Tomahawk cruise missiles are confirmed in flight. The implications are not limited to what burns on the ground in southern Iran. Simultaneously, explosions have been reported in Kerman, a city in south-central Iran, inland from both the Gulf Coast and the Bushehr nuclear facility, extending the geographic scope of American strikes further into the Iranian interior than previous waves had reached. Kerman is not a coastal military installation. It is a provincial capital in the heart of Iran, and its appearance on tonight's confirmed explosion list suggests a continued expansion of the American targeting calculus beyond the maritime threat reduction framework that initially defined the operation's stated objectives. Now let's look at the Iranian Air Force's response, because it tells you something important about the gap between Iranian military intent and Iranian military capability. Iran scrambled F-5 fighter jets, an aircraft that entered service in the 1970s, near Mashhad in an attempt to assert some control over their own airspace following the resumption of American strikes. The F-5, against F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs. This is not a competitive engagement. This is not a tactical contest between comparable military systems. An Iranian F-5 interceptor attempting to challenge American fifth-generation stealth fighters in contested airspace has approximately the same probability of tactical success as a rowboat challenging a nuclear aircraft carrier. The visual and technological gulf between these platforms is not a matter of degree. It is a matter of era. The F-5 is a Korean war generation design refined for the Vietnam War period. The F-22 and F-35 are 21st century air superiority platforms with stealth, supercruise, active electronically scanned array radar, and sensor fusion capabilities that the F-5's entire avionics package cannot detect, let alone counter. The scrambling of F-5s is not a military response. It is a political gesture, a demonstration for domestic Iranian audiences that the Air Force is responding, that the regime is not simply absorbing American strikes passively, that the institutional apparatus of Iranian national defense is in motion. But in the skies over Iran on July 11th, 2026, the F-5 pilots taking off from Iranian airfields are not going to change the operational reality of a conflict in which American aircraft are flying over Iranian territory with confirmed total air superiority and zero credible resistance from Iranian manned aircraft. The IRGC understands this, which is precisely why it has concentrated its retaliatory strategy entirely in the ballistic missile and drone domains, the only two areas of its military inventory where it retains any genuine capacity to reach American targets. Ballistic missiles, because their flight profiles compress response time for any defender. Drones, because of their numbers, their cost-effectiveness compared to the interceptors required to shoot them down, and their ability to saturate air defense systems through volume rather than speed. These are Iran's two tools. Everything else has been degraded, outranged, or outclassed. The kill list dimension of this conflict has now been publicly confirmed at the highest level of the American political structure, and it adds a psychological dimension to the operational picture that goes beyond the military exchanges themselves. President Trump, speaking on the record while traveling, confirmed the existence of an Iranian kill list of targeted American figures, and confirmed that he is number one on that list. The circumstances surrounding Air Force One's recent departure from Turkey, passengers directed to close window blinds, defense systems at elevated readiness, the switch to an older Air Force One variant with superior defensive systems, suggest that American security services assessed a credible threat to the presidential aircraft at a level serious enough to alter standard operational protocols. When the leader of the United States is switching aircraft and directing media aboard to close their window blinds because of a credible Iranian threat assessment, the conflict has reached a dimension of personal targeting at the highest levels that transforms the political calculus on both sides in ways no purely military analysis can fully capture. This is not hypothetical bluster. The protocols were changed. The aircraft was switched. The windows were closed. These are institutional security responses to threat assessments, the kind of responses that only happen when the intelligence picture justifies them, and Trump confirmed it on camera, directly, without hedging. He is number one on Iran's kill list. He has been told so by the people whose job it is to know. The psychological weight of a sitting U.S. president publicly confirming that Iran is actively planning to kill him, while Tomahawk cruise missiles are simultaneously impacting Iranian nuclear facilities and Iranian ballistic missiles are flying toward American bases in Jordan and Iraq, is not separable from the military and strategic dimensions of this conflict. It is part of the same picture, and it represents a level of personal, direct confrontation between the American executive and the Iranian military political establishment that fundamentally changes the personal stakes for the decision makers on the American side in ways that institutional analysis consistently underweights. A president who has publicly confirmed he is Iran's primary assassination target is not a president who will be inclined toward the kind of measured, calibrated escalation management that diplomatic frameworks typically require. That reality is embedded in the conflict's dynamics and will shape its trajectory in the coming days, in ways that are difficult to predict precisely but impossible to ignore analytically. Now let's address the Iranian oil panic, because it reveals the financial pressure track with a clarity that no market report has yet captured. Iran is reported to have rushed 10 million barrels of oil to sea in the hours following the resumption of U.S. strikes. 10 million barrels moved to sea simultaneously in direct response to American officials confirming that the United States is prepared to resume seizing Iranian oil tankers. 10 million barrels is not a routine shipment schedule adjustment. It is a panicked attempt to get as much revenue-generating cargo beyond the reach of American naval seizure as possible, as fast as possible, before the enforcement mechanism closes around Iranian maritime commerce. The scale and speed of that response tells you something critical about the financial pressure the Islamic Republic is operating under. A regime with robust financial reserves and genuine economic resilience does not rush 10 million barrels of oil to sea in a single operational window because it is afraid of tanker seizures. A regime that responds with that kind of speed and volume is a regime operating with a level of financial anxiety that the official Iranian economic narrative has worked hard to conceal, but which the behavior of rushing 10 million barrels of oil to sea in a single day reveals in unmistakable terms. The oil markets are already pricing this conflict in ways that radiate far beyond the immediate theater. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits, is now simultaneously the site of an active American military campaign against Iranian coastal infrastructure and the geographic corridor through which Iranian ballistic missiles are being fired toward U.S. allies and American bases. Every tanker captain calculating a transit of that corridor is doing so against the backdrop of active military operations. In the waters, they must navigate and active missile exchanges in the airspace above them. The insurance premium implications alone are enough to reshape global shipping economics for months. The rerouting decisions being made by tanker operators right now, whether to add weeks and thousands of miles to every voyage rather than transit the strait under these conditions, will ripple through global energy prices in ways that affect ordinary consumers in Europe, Asia, and the United States, in their fuel costs, their heating bills, and the prices of every good transported using fuel as an input. The financial pressure track of this conflict is global, not regional. And it is intensifying on July 11th, 2026, at every hour that the missiles continue to fly. Now let's construct the three-track convergence analysis, because the individual dimensions of this conflict are significant, but their simultaneous convergence is what creates the genuinely dangerous and genuinely unprecedented pressure environment that currently exists. The military track, as of this moment, is defined by a paradox. The United States has demonstrated overwhelming and confirmed air superiority over Iranian territory. American aircraft are operating over Iran with zero credible resistance from Iranian manned aircraft. The degradation of Iranian coastal military infrastructure, air defense systems, surveillance assets, missile storage, drone production, naval capabilities, speedboat fleets has been real, confirmed, and cumulatively significant. The rail bridge severing China's ground supply route to Iran represents a strategic-level degradation blow that extends beyond the operational theater into Iran's long-term military sustainability. And yet Iran's ballistic missile force, dispersed, interior-based, less visible to pre-strike surveillance than coastal installations, and maintained as a strategic deterrent reserve rather than expended freely, has demonstrated the ability to reach targets in Jordan and Iraq simultaneously, to put interceptors into the air across multiple countries at once, and to maintain launch operations from multiple provinces while absorbing an American airstrike campaign that, by its own official description, is getting larger with each successive wave. The military track is not resolved. It is escalating in both directions simultaneously. The financial track is being compressed at every choke point available. Iranian oil rushed to sea to escape seizure. Global tanker operators recalculating Strait of Hormuz transit risk against active military operations. Insurance markets adjusting premiums in real time. Energy prices responding to supply disruption uncertainty. The Islamic Republic's own revenue streams threatened by the same Strait of Hormuz dynamics its military adventurism created. The financial track is a compressing vice, and it is closing from both directions, tightening on Iran's revenue capacity, while simultaneously raising the economic cost of the conflict for every nation whose energy supply depends on uninterrupted Gulf transit. The psychological track is operating at a level of intensity that has no precedent in recent U.S.-Iran confrontations. A U.S. president publicly confirming he is Iran's primary assassination target. Air Force One switching aircraft variants and directing passengers to close window blinds because of credible Iranian threat assessments. A banner hung in Mashhad reading, "We will kill Trump," a public, physical, city-scale declaration of assassination intent displayed in one of Iran's largest cities. Iranian state media declaring the Strait of Hormuz under permanent Iranian control, a declaration directly contradicted by the operational reality of American aircraft flying over Iranian territory with complete impunity. The IRGC publicly broadcasting its own missile launches as a propaganda tool, while American forces publicly broadcast footage of those missiles being intercepted and Iranian targets being destroyed. Both sides are fighting the psychological war simultaneously with the kinetic war. And in a conflict where the adversary's political will to continue is as operationally significant as its physical military capacity, the psychological track may ultimately determine the outcome before the military track finishes resolving it. Now, for the command structure analysis that the operational summaries consistently skip, Iran's ballistic missile launches from interior provinces, Markazi and Western Azerbaijan, rather than exclusively from the coastal installations that have been the focus of American targeting, tells you something important about the IRGC's operational planning for exactly this scenario. The dispersal of launch capability into the Iranian interior was not improvised under pressure. It was pre-planned. The IRGC anticipated a sustained American campaign against its coastal infrastructure and positioned launch assets in interior provinces, specifically to survive that campaign and maintain retaliatory capacity. That level of operational foresight does not reflect a military institution in institutional disarray. It reflects a military institution that has been planning for extended conflict, that has studied American targeting patterns from previous engagements, and that has made deliberate decisions about distributing its most strategically irreplaceable assets, ballistic missile launch capability, across a geographic area too large and too interior for coastal-focused degradation campaigns to systematically eliminate. But the IRGC's operational sophistication in pre-positioning launch assets creates its own command and control problem. Distributed assets in multiple provinces, operating semi-autonomously under the pressure of an ongoing American strike campaign, with communications infrastructure that has itself been targeted by American strikes, and with an institutional commitment to a multi-stage escalation sequence publicly declared through official channels, all of this creates the conditions for launch decisions being made at the provincial operational level that may not reflect a coherent, coordinated, politically calibrated decision from the Supreme Leader's office. 8 launchers spotted activating for fire in a single operational window across different provinces represents a coordination challenge that becomes more acute as communication infrastructure degrades and as individual IRGC components operate under the immediate pressure of ongoing American strikes. The risk is not a deliberate decision by the Supreme Leader to cross a threshold that triggers an unmanageable American response. The risk is an IRGC operational commander in a dispersed interior province with degraded communications and the institutional pressure of the IRGC's public commitment to expanding retaliation, launching against a target that the political leadership in Tehran had not sanctioned in a way that produces consequences no one in the command structure was prepared to manage. Now the honest strategic assessment that the official narratives from both Washington and Tehran are each, in their own way, obscuring. The United States is winning the operational military campaign in measurable, confirmable, documented ways. Iranian air defense has been degraded to the point of irrelevance for manned American aircraft. The coastal military infrastructure of the IRGC has been systematically dismantled across multiple strike waves. The rail supply corridor from China has been severed. Ballistic missile storage facilities and drone production infrastructure are burning. The IRGC's speedboat fleet has been decimated. The nuclear city at Bushehr has been struck with cruise missiles. American aircraft are flying over Iranian territory with complete air superiority and zero credible resistance from Iranian military aviation. On every conventional military metric, the United States holds all the significant advantages, and those advantages are being applied at a scale and tempo that is increasing by official American confirmation with each successive day of operations. And yet the Islamic Republic has not sued for peace. It has launched massive ballistic missile counterattacks against targets in Jordan and Iraq simultaneously. It has rushed 10 million barrels of oil to sea in a single window. It has publicly declared through its state media that the Strait of Hormuz is under Iranian permanent control, and that the situation will never return to the pre-conflict status quo. Its military advisor has threatened to strike every Arab state in the region that supported the American campaign. And its supreme leader's political survival is now structurally bound to a conflict posture that cannot be abandoned without triggering the regime's domestic political collapse. Iran is losing on the military track and escalating politically. That combination, military deterioration paired with political inflexibility, is the most dangerous operational environment in any conflict, because it creates the conditions for decisions made not out of military confidence but out of political desperation. Desperate decisions produce disproportionate actions. Disproportionate actions in a theater where ballistic missiles are already impacting near American military installations cross thresholds that trigger mandatory escalation responses. The structural risk that belongs at the center of this analysis is not the next Iranian missile launch or the next American airstrike. It is the compressing gap between the IRGC's public institutional commitments, multi-stage escalation, striking every supporting Arab state, permanent Strait of Hormuz control, and the military reality of a force that has lost its air defense, its coastal installations, its drone production capacity, its speedboat fleet, its China supply rail corridor, and its nuclear city's security perimeter to an American campaign that is officially described as still getting larger. When institutional public commitments exceed operational military capacity, and when the leadership structure binding those commitments to that capacity is fractured across semi-autonomous provincial components with degraded communications, the mechanism by which this gap produces a catastrophic miscalculation is not a theoretical model. It is the operational condition that exists right now, in real time, as of the morning of July 11th, 2026. Go back to Jordan. Go back to the footage of interceptors racing skyward over Jordanian territory to meet incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. Go back to the sirens at Camp Victory near the Baghdad Airport. Go back to the explosions in Erbil, in the Kurdish heartland, where American advisory presence sits alongside the consular infrastructure of U.S. diplomatic engagement with Iraq's most stable governing entity. Jordan was not supposed to be inside this war. Erbil was not supposed to be inside this war. The Kurdish regional government, whose relationship with both the United States and with Iran is complicated, historically painful, and strategically critical to the broader stability of the northern Iraq theater, was not supposed to be inside this war. And yet Iranian ballistic missiles are targeting airspace over Jordan. Explosions are confirmed in Erbil. Warning sirens are active near the Baghdad Airport. The geography of this conflict is not expanding slowly, with warning signs visible far enough in advance to allow calibrated policy responses. It is expanding in a single night's operational cycle, pulling in countries and regions and political actors who had not chosen to be inside the blast radius, and who now find themselves there regardless of what they chose. That is what a war that has lost its edges looks like. And that is what July 11th, 2026 looks like from the inside of it. The Tomahawk cruise missiles are still flying over Bushehr. The ballistic missiles from Markazi province are still being launched. The interceptors over Jordan are still climbing. The smoke plume above the nuclear power plant is visible on satellite footage being processed by analytical teams who are, right now, trying to determine exactly what burned and what it means for the fissile material stored at a facility that multiple nations had declared off limits, and which the United States has now struck with precision cruise weapons in the middle of the hottest night of fighting this conflict has yet produced. Iran launched massively. America kept striking. The nuclear city is on fire. The supply line to China is cut. And a U.S. president has confirmed on camera that he is the #1 target on an Iranian kill list that the intelligence community assesses as credible enough to change the aircraft. He flies on and closes the windows of the plane around him. This is not a conflict approaching a decisive turning point. This is a conflict that has already turned and is now accelerating through the territory on the other side of it toward an endpoint that nobody, not in Washington, not in Tehran, not in Moscow or Beijing, or the Gulf capitals watching from positions of increasing alarm, can map with any confidence from where things stand right now. The missiles are still in the air, and the next launch window is already being prepared.